He hadn't wanted war. He really hadn't. The stars were beautiful, full of silence and promise, the kind of place a man could disappear in, start over, breathe. That's all Captain Drew Halverson ever wanted. Some damn peace. But peace is a foreign word when you're human and surrounded by aliens who see your kind as a virus. The Varan Empire, sleek and serpentine with cold green eyes, called Earth a primitive anomaly. They smiled during the Accords, shook hands, then sent warships cloaked in shadow to bomb out colonies in the outer rings. Mars first, then Titan. Families turned to ash in a vacuum. No warning, no reason, no mercy. Drew had lost everything on Mars. His brother, his niece, even his dog, for God's sake. It wasn't just war. It was slaughter. And when he looked into the council chambers for justice, they gave him politics, speeches, more handshakes. "You must understand, Captain Halverson," the Chancellor of the Orion Belt stammered, her eyes glazed with fear. "We can't retaliate. The Varoon are too powerful." Too powerful, Drew thought. That's what they always said. Like humans weren't made of blood, fire, and stubbornness. Like being outnumbered meant lying down and dying quietly. Not for Drew. That night, he walked out of the council chambers, stripped of rank, honor, and command. But the fire in his chest had never burned hotter. They wanted war. He'd give them something they'd never forget. He didn't need approval. He didn't need armies. He needed a ship, a cause, and the hatred that lived behind his teeth. They took Earth's pride. He'd take their planets. He started small, a stolen freighter, some black market nukes from the edge of the Andromeda Drift, smugglers, mercs, exiled engineers, anyone who'd lost something to the Varan and didn't mind painting entire skies red. He found them in backroom bars and prison mines. He spoke with quiet fury, and they followed. They called themselves Ashborn, not soldiers, not rebels, but survivors turned executioners. The first Varan moon fell in silence, no warning, no trace, just a crater where once stood a city of glass. The second was louder, broadcast across the galactic net as Drew stood over the ashes, blood-smeared and snarling into the camera. "You want war, then watch your worlds burn." He didn't hide. He dared them to chase him. And they did. But Drew had studied them, learned how they thought, how they moved. Varan's strategy was elegance and precision. His was chaos and hatred. They underestimated how much rage a human could carry across galaxies. Each time they came for him, they lost more than ships, they lost planets. The Galactic Council began whispering his name like a curse. The Varan called him the Scourge, but Drew and as the void burned with the fire of dying stars, Drew stood on the bridge of his battered cruiser, breathing heavy, staring at the map ahead. Next was Varoon Prime, the heart of the Empire, and he would rip it out with his bare hands if he had to. The Ashborn cruiser, Vengeance Arc, cut through the void like a blade too jagged for peace. Its hull was a patchwork of stolen tech, its weapons stripped from the ruins of enemies, ugly, brutal, but alive, like Drew. He stood at the helm, gripping the rails as the stars dragged by. Sweat clung to his brow, not from fear, he hadn't felt that in a long time, but from pressure. His bones ached from old wounds, his heart from older ones. "Update!" he barked. His second, Carl, stepped forward. Not military, not trained, just another broken soul with a rifle and a reason. "Varoon fleet scrambled near Hawk 9. 2 cruisers, 1 carrier, all heading for Varoon Prime." Drew narrowed his eyes. "They're pulling back." Carl nodded. "Seems like it. After we dusted that logistics moon, they're panicking." Drew exhaled. Not a sigh, just a release. He liked panic. Panic made people stupid. "What's the casualty report?" he asked, not because he cared about numbers, but because he cared about what was being lost, what he was breaking. Carl's voice lowered. Rough estimate, 1.2 million Varun civilians, non-combat. Drew looked out the viewing screen. The galaxy looked peaceful from here, serene. It was a lie. Everything was always burning, just depended on how close you were standing. Good, he muttered. They need to learn. Cal hesitated. You sure about that, Cap? I mean, civilians. Drew turned slowly. Were the kids on Mars civilians? Cal dropped his eyes. Did the Varun warn before they firebombed half of Titan? Cal clenched his jaw but said nothing. Let me tell you something, Drew growled. This isn't a war for territory. This is genocide. The Varun wanted us erased. They just didn't think we'd claw back from the grave and spit in their eye. He leaned in. So yeah, I'm sure. Until their people cry louder than ours did, they won't stop. Cal gave a short nod and walked off. The others on the bridge stayed quiet. They'd heard it all before. Some believed it. Others just needed the paycheck, or the revenge, or a place to belong. Drew didn't judge. He wasn't a good man. Good men died back on Mars. In his quarters, the only light came from old photos burned into hollow pads. His brother with his daughter, both smiling in the red dust of the Martian sunrise. A dog with one ear up, one flopped sideways. He touched the screen. That's our next target. Murmurs, raised brows, a few outright gasps. You're insane, someone said. It was Rex, the captain of Midnight Grin, tall, scarred, and missing half a jaw from a Varun sniper. No, Drew said coolly. I'm done playing. You're talking about attacking their homeworld, another voice chimed in. Do you know how fortified it is? The orbital defense alone, Drew interrupted. We're not going to win a battle. We're going to make a statement. Silence. He stepped forward. Every time they strike, they think we'll take it, that we'll negotiate, that we'll sit and bleed while they smile behind polished words. I'm done bleeding. He activated a hollow map. Varun Prime blinked at the center. I've got the codes, coordinates, entry patterns, took them off a council diplomat who didn't survive interrogation. A few chuckled grimly. 3 jumps through the Draken Rift and we're in. We won't last long once we're there, but we don't need to. What's the plan? Kale asked. We hit the surface, capital district, governmental sector. Leave nothing standing. We won't hold the world. We'll turn their throne into a crater. And the civilians? Another voice asked carefully. Drew didn't blink. Collateral. No one spoke. No one argued. They knew the score. They'd crossed too many lines to pretend they had morals left. The jump through the Draken Rift was a suicide run. The rift tore smaller ships apart, twisted space like it hated logic, but Drew's ship held, barely. They exited near Varun Prime's orbit. The planet was beautiful. Rings like frozen rainbows, oceans so wide they reflected starlight like mirrors, cities floating on metal spires above forests untouched for millennia, the heart of the empire. Kale stared. We're really doing this? Drew nodded. Fire up the drums. Massive silos on Vengeance Arc hissed to life. Warheads older than the Alliance, black market antimatter bombs so volatile even pirates refused to use them. Drew had 8. He planned to use all of them. The Varun fleet saw them too late. Drew's ships spread like a disease across orbit, releasing chaos into the calm. Dogfights tore through the sky. Varun defense systems activated, but the Ashborn didn't fight fair. They hijacked systems, jammed frequencies, sent ghost signals into their networks. As the battle exploded in orbit, Drew took a drop shuttle to the surface with 20 of his most suicidal fighters, straight into the capital. They landed in fire. The city erupted around them, sirens, screams, flashes of violet light from Varun pulse weapons. Drew moved like a shadow with a rifle, no mercy, no hesitation. Every corridor was a memory of Mars, every fallen Varun was one step closer to vengeance. They reached.
"You remember Mars?" Drew asked him. The governor hissed, defiant to the end. "You're a savage." Drew leaned in close, blood dripping from his armor. "We were farmers, miners, scientists, kids. You made us monsters. Now choke on it." He shot the governor in the chest. No ceremony, just closure. From orbit, Kale watched the palace collapse in on itself. A tidal wave of fire rolled through the capital. Drew's shuttle barely made it out, scarred, smoking, but alive. The Ashborn fleet scattered as Varun reinforcements arrived. Some ships made it out, others didn't. But the message was clear. Varun Prime was bleeding for the first time in centuries. The Empire was afraid. Back in deep space, Drew sat alone, his face bruised, his armor cracked, but his eyes gleamed. Kale brought him a flask. "You did it." "No," Drew said. "I started it." Kale tilted his head. "What now?" Drew looked out the viewport. The galaxy shimmered with light. Planets full of people, some innocent, some not. "They'll come for us harder now," Kale warned. "I hope they do," Drew said. He took a slow sip from the flask and whispered to no one in particular. "You want war? Then watch your worlds burn." They called it the Day of Black Suns. The galactic net was flooded with images, smoke rising from Varun Prime's capital, ash falling like snow. Cities crumbled, children cried, politicians wept behind steel walls. One photo went viral. Drew Halverson, silhouetted in flames, holding a Varun banner upside down with a scorched rifle in his other hand. The media turned him into a monster. Some called him a war criminal, others a ghost. But for those who had lost everything, those forgotten by peace treaties and cold councils, Drew became something more. He became the answer. After the palace fell, Drew vanished into the stars. No trace, no signal. The Ashborn scattered across uncharted sectors, split into cells, each with their own methods, their own vendettas. What began as vengeance became doctrine. Leave nothing sacred. Strike without warning. Fear is the first weapon. Fire is the second. They hit supply routes, torched outposts, sabotaged peace talks. And every time the Varun tried to retaliate, the humans hit harder, meaner, smarter. Even the most advanced technology couldn't match the cold, bloody creativity of desperate humans who had nothing left to lose. Drew didn't stop. He couldn't. He no longer wanted justice. He wanted legacy. Aboard the Vengeance Ark, Kale stormed into Drew's quarters, his face grim. "We need to talk." Drew sat by the window, staring into nothing. "Talk." Kale tossed the datapad onto the table. "This isn't strategy anymore, it's slaughter. Drew, they killed a senator's entire family. Not a soldier, not a general, a wife and her 2 daughters. They signed the orders for Mars," Drew said coldly. "They toasted to it in their halls. There are no civilians in empire building." Kale shook his head. "We were soldiers, fighters, survivors. Now we're butchers." Drew finally turned, his voice low but laced with steel. "You think they cared when they burned our colonies? When they experimented on our prisoners? I held a man in my arms who had his spine shattered by a Varun mind probe. I buried kids who never learned what stars were. Don't tell me about lines, Kale. There are no lines left." Kale clenched his fists. "And what about us? How long before we become the thing we hated?" Drew stood, taller, heavier, radiating something dangerous. "We became that the day they made us crawl. I don't want to win, Kale. I want them to remember for 1,000 years." Kale stared at him for a long time. then left without another word. Meanwhile, the Varun were bleeding from the inside. The council met in a fortified, orbiting citadel far from their core worlds. Dozens of species, all terrified. "He's just a human," roared the Varen warlord. "One man." "He's more than a man now," said the Dress ambassador. "He's an idea, and ideas don't die easily." The room broke into shouting. Drew had become a myth. Children spoke his name in fear. Pirates swore by it. Freedom. Fighters tattooed his face on their arms. Whole colonies defected in his name. And worse, the humans still loyal to the old governments were getting swept up in the chaos. The line between resistance and terrorism was blurred beyond recognition. On a forgotten moon, deep in a system no one cared about, Drew stood before a group of new recruits. Farmers, ex-cons, broken people with too much anger and too few options. He looked over them, his face hard, his eyes colder than vacuum. "You came here for revenge," he said. "Good. Revenge is honest. Revenge doesn't lie to you. But if you're here to feel better, leave now. You won't." No one moved. "You'll kill people who didn't deserve it. You'll torch cities that once loved humans. You'll hear screaming in your sleep and feel nothing. That's what this war takes." Still, no one moved. Drew nodded. "Then welcome to the Ashborn."
In private, Drew studied old maps, star charts, intercepted signals. The Varun were faltering. The cracks were growing. Civil unrest, riots on outer colonies. Even Varun citizens were turning against the Empire. That's when Kale returned with news Drew didn't expect. "There's a rebel faction forming on Isis II, Varun defectors." Drew raised an eyebrow. "Defectors? Military officers, scientists, even nobles? They're turning on the council, want peace, real peace." Drew leaned back. "Why now?" Kale shrugged. "Maybe they finally see the truth. Maybe they're scared of me," Drew said flatly. Kale didn't disagree. "They want to talk," he added. "With you." Drew's face twisted. "Why? Because they think you can stop this before everything burns?" Drew met them alone. He landed on Alaris II in the dead of night, walking through a windstorm, his coat flapping behind him like a banner of death. The Varun rebels were waiting, clean, polished, nervous. One stepped forward, female, high cheekbones, thin voice. "Captain Halverson, I'm Levine." "I don't care," Drew said. She hesitated. "We want peace." "So did I," he snapped, "before your kind turned Mars into a graveyard." She swallowed. "We didn't order those attacks. You were silent. That was enough. We want to fix this." Drew stepped close, voice ice. "You think this can be fixed? I buried my brother in dust so fine. I had to scoop him with a shovel. There's no fixing this. There's only fire. But the killing is the only thing they understand." Leah looked into his eyes. "What about the children?" Drew didn't blink. "You think they left ours alive?" Silence. "You're not here to stop me," he said. "You're here to beg, because you know what comes next." She didn't deny it. Drew stepped back. "Tell your people I'm not here for peace. I'm here for proof. When the last Varun monument falls, when your empire forgets what power feels like, then we talk." He left the meeting angrier than he arrived. Peace now after all this. Too late. The war was bigger than him now, bigger than the Ashborn. It was a sickness, and Drew was the symptom, the fever before the body dies. That night he stared at the stars again, wondering if this was what winning felt like. Hollow, cold, exhausting. He didn't sleep. He just planned. Because he knew what came next. Varun High Command, the last stronghold, the head of the snake. Drew would cut it off, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to. Because some empires only understand the taste of their own ashes. The galaxy wasn't watching anymore. It was holding its breath,
Every news stream, every border system, every outpost and orbital ring, they weren't asking if Drew Halverson would strike.
Varun. High Command. Underground, fortified, hidden beneath the black glass mountains of Aora Prime. It wasn't just a military center. It was the mind of the Empire. The place where orders were given, where wars were calculated like currency. If Varun Prime was the heart, Aora was the brain. And Drew was coming to cut it out. The Ashborn fleet was smaller now, tight, focused. The chaos had scattered most of their number. Some killed, others retired to whatever lives broken killers returned to. Only the core remained, the ones who didn't flinch when the alarm screamed. Kale stood in the war room with a dozen others, dirty, hardened. Every one of them had lost more than they could explain, and all of them had one thing in common. They followed Drew. He walked in, unshaven, his armor dull with wear. A silent nod from him, and the room froze. "We're going to Aora," he said. Kale exhaled slowly. "You're sure? They think they're safe, deep, buried, watching from their towers." Drew's eyes burned. "We'll remind them what fear feels like." A murmur of agreement passed through the room. "They'll have satellites, orbital shields, mine belts," Kale said. "Already accounted for," Drew replied. "We found a hole in their magnetic grid. Took 2 years to spot it, 2 seconds to decide what to do with it." He activated a map. The path lit up. Black space, then deep inside asteroid fields, then under the planetary crust itself. "We're going under them," Drew said. "Straight through the rock. We'll punch a hole beneath the command base, and then we turn their brain into glass." Someone laughed, not joy, but disbelief. Kale frowned. "We won't make it out." Drew just nodded. No one objected. The operation began 3 days later. The ship was Ashfall, a drill cruiser built from a mining vessel Drew stole years ago, reinforced with hull plates scavenged from a dozen species. It was a monster of a machine, slow, ugly, and indestructible. They dropped into the asteroid field, scraping past space debris sharp enough to gut a battleship. No lights, no signals, only silence and fire. Drew sat at the console, his hand on the manual override. "Bring us in," he said. The ship groaned, the drill at its front whirred to life, cutting into the rock crust of Aora Prime like a saw through bone. Kale sat beside him. "You think it ends here?" Drew didn't look over. "It never ends." Kale was quiet a moment. "You know, when I joined you, I wanted revenge. Now I don't know what I want." "That's what war does," Drew said. "It takes your reason and replaces it with routine." Kale gave a bitter smile. "Sounds familiar." The drill took 12 hours to cut through the crust. The deeper they went, the hotter it got. Systems strained, hulls creaked, pressure screamed through the vents like ghosts. Then they hit metal. The breach was violent. Explosives lined the drill tunnel, blasting upward into the foundation of Varun High Command. The walls shook, fire bloomed through corridors. Alarms howled. Soldiers poured from every hatch, trained, fast, precise. But they weren't ready for him. Drew moved like a force of nature. No wasted motion, 1 bullet, 1 kill. Grenades fell into rooms before doors opened. Lasers hissed past his shoulder, but nothing slowed him. Behind him, the Ashborn followed, close combat, quick deaths. They knew the map, knew the layout. They'd studied this place for years. Kale was bleeding, his shoulder torn open, but he kept firing. Drew planted charges in the data core, the reactor, the upper tower. They didn't want control, they wanted destruction. In the command chamber, the last Varun admiral stood, shaking, hands raised. "You're a human," he whispered. Drew raised his gun. "Not anymore." The shot echoed through the steel halls like a bell of doom. The mountain exploded. From orbit, satellites caught the eruption, black smoke spiraling into the sky, glowing lava pouring from the cracked earth like the planet was bleeding from its skull.
The Ashbourne's shuttle barely escaped the collapse. Kale collapsed onto the deck, wheezing. Drew stood silently, watching the surface below melt into ruin, his face unreadable. Someone from the crew asked, "Is it over?" He didn't answer, because he didn't know. In the days that followed, the Empire cracked. Without command, their fleets broke into factions. Civil wars ignited. Whole species declared independence. Peace talks fell apart. The galaxy became a storm of chaos. And through it all, one name kept surfacing: Drew Halverson. He had no titles, no throne, no medals, but his shadow stretched longer than any emperor's ever did. Back on a derelict station hidden inside a gas giant, Drew sat alone. He hadn't spoken in days, not since Aora. Kale approached, his arm in a sling. "We won," he said. Drew looked at him, tired, older than he had any right to be. "No," he replied. "We survived." Kale pulled up a chair. "So what now? Hide? Run?" Drew leaned forward. "Now we do the hardest thing." Kale raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" "Disappear." Kale blinked. "Seriously?" "They want a warlord," Drew said. "A monster, a villain to rally against. If I stay, I become the new empire, different name, same chains. And if you vanish—" Drew looked at him. "Then maybe they build something better in the ashes." Kale laughed bitterly. "You're talking about hope." "No," Drew said quietly. "I'm talking about silence."
The galaxy had no center anymore. The Varun Empire, once the unshakable spine of order across hundreds of systems, was fractured into splinters. Its loyalists squabbled over scraps of territory, screaming for obedience while their worlds tore themselves apart. Pirates swarmed, factions rose and fell like dying stars. Civil wars flared in places that hadn't seen blood in a generation. And behind it all was a silence louder than any explosion. Drew Halverson had vanished. Some thought he was dead. Others believed he was hiding, rebuilding, waiting. Every month, rumors surfaced. He was spotted on a mining colony near Taros 5. No, he'd joined a cult in the dust fields of Sector 19. No, he'd become a weaponized ghost construct in some deep AI lab. None were true. But none were completely false either. Because the war he started wasn't about him anymore. Kale now led what remained of the Ashbourne. What had started as a knife of revenge was now a scattered set of blades carving different wounds. Some Ashbourne cells became mercenaries. Others turned full-on terrorists. A few tried to become protectors, unlikely defenders of civilian systems that had no military left. Kale had chosen something harder. He was trying to build on a forgotten moon called Arcos 9. Kale established what he called the core, not a government, not a militia, just people. People with scars, fighters, technicians, refugees, ex-Varun, ex-Ashbourne, all drawn together by one truth. They couldn't go back to what came before. They didn't believe in utopia, but they believed in not repeating. Kale stood in the central dome, wind howling against the outer shields as engineers laid the foundation for a new generator. He wore no insignia, just a coat and a pulse pistol on his hip, enough to be respected, not worshipped. A voice came through on his comms. It was Reyna, one of the last surviving Ashbourne tacticians. "Convoy from Iroh's belt made it through the gravity storms. Supplies coming in," Kale acknowledged. "Losses? 2 wounded, 1 missing." "Find them," he said, and cut the line. He walked the perimeter. The moon was barren, lifeless, perfect for staying hidden. But he knew they weren't invisible. Not for long. Eyes were always watching, especially now. Back on Varun-controlled space, a new figure had emerged. Her name was Commander Isari, young for her rank, brutal beyond her years. She'd lost family in Drew's war, and she swore vengeance. But she was smart. She didn't waste fleets chasing ghosts. She studied the Ashborn, tracked supply routes, analyzed patterns. Kale knew it was coming. He stood in the command tent of the Corps, staring at a map of systems. Too many variables, too many threats, and one cold truth. They couldn't fight forever. He turned to Reyna. "We need to find him." She raised an eyebrow. "Drew?" Kale nodded. "If Isari is building momentum, if she moves on us, we won't survive it alone." Reyna looked away. "You sure he's still alive?" Kale didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "He's not the kind of man who dies quietly." Far from Arcos 9, in a sector where stars were more myth than light, a freighter drifted alone, power low, hull scarred. Inside, Drew Halverson sat in the dark. He hadn't spoken to anyone in over a year, hadn't touched a weapon in 6 months. The only sound was the hum of the engines and his own breathing. He wasn't hiding. He was waiting for the weight to leave his chest. It never did. Each night he saw their faces, people he'd killed, people he hadn't saved. The girl on Titan with a melted face, the Varun child crawling from rubble, his niece laughing in Martian dust. He didn't regret what he did, but he regretted needing to. A knock on the airlock broke the silence. It wasn't possible. He was 100 light-years off any known route. Drew drew his pistol automatically. Instincts dull, but not dead. The hatch opened slowly. Kale stepped through, covered in sand, eyes sunken from exhaustion. "Took us a long time to find you," he said. Drew didn't lower the gun. "You shouldn't have come." "Too bad," Kale replied. "I need you." Drew stared, then said, "I'm done." Kale stepped closer. "She's coming. She's not like the rest. She's not making speeches, she's making moves. Tactical, surgical. She's already taken back 4 systems." Drew looked away. "I've got kids on Arcos 9, Kale said. "Kids who never held a gun, engineers, medics, families. They believe in something, and she's going to burn them all to prove a point." Silence stretched. "You said the fire ends with you," Kale added. "You were wrong." Drew closed his eyes. He'd started it, and maybe that meant he had to end it the right way. A week later, the Ashborn signal went out. 1 tone, 4 notes, a code they all knew. Rally across abandoned systems, in caves and ships and shattered cities. The old symbols flickered back to life. Ashborn survivors stared at screens and didn't believe it at first, but then they heard the voice. "This is Halverson," Drew said. "Last call. One final..." Far above, cloaked in a magnetic storm, Drew's ship waited. Not with a fleet, not with fire, but with something worse. A virus. Back doors Drew had planted years ago in the Varun fleet comm systems, buried under layers of code, a flicker, a worm, now activated. He whispered into his console, "Lights out." And every ship in Isari's fleet went blind. Alarms blared. Screens went dead. Weapons refused to fire. Engines stalled. And then Drew spoke through every Varun channel. "I told you. You wanted war. Now watch your empire fall again." Back on Arcos 9, Kale watched the fleet spin in confusion. Then a blip on the radar. One ship descending. Drew. He landed in silence, no ceremony, just a man in a black coat stepping into the dust. Kale met him at the edge of the pad. Drew said nothing. Kale didn't ask anything. They just walked together toward the fire again. The skies over Arcos 9 burned silver. The Varun fleet, crippled but still enormous, hung in orbit like a shattered crown. Systems flickered, engines rebooted. Isari's flagship, Eminence, was limping, its main cannons cold, its shielding fried, but it was still a beast, and she wasn't turning back. She had something Drew Halverson didn't. Desperation. Inside the core, the air was heavy. Engineers scrambled, weapons were calibrated by exhausted hands, children were moved underground. Kale paced with a fury that matched the storm clouds forming above. Drew stood in silence beside him. "You really think they'll come down without air support?" Kale asked. "They're too proud not to," Drew replied. Kale scowled. "Even after you killed their tech?" "Especially after." Isari's forces began atmospheric descent at 0300. 2 drop cruisers, armored platoon, no air cover, no drones, just boots and guns. Old school, up-close war. She didn't want clean, she wanted blood. Drew checked the rifle he hadn't used since Aora Prime. Scratched, matte black, one modification, a phrase etched into the side. Forgive nothing. Reyna came through the blast doors carrying a crate of plasma grenades. "Final count?" she asked. 200 fighters, give or take. We've got the terrain, they've got the numbers. She raised an eyebrow toward Drew. "And the monster?" "He doesn't count as a fighter," someone muttered. "He's something else." The first impact shook the ground. Drop cruisers landed like gods, slamming fists into stone. Dust clouds swallowed the outer ridges. Black, armored Varun commandos deployed in perfect lines, flawless discipline. They moved as one, rifles drawn, visors lit with scanning HUDs. The Corps fighters, the first shots cracked like bone. Ashborn fighters opened fire from cliff sides. Varun troops responded with suppressive bursts, pushing forward in tactical waves. The rocky terrain turned into a maze of blood and smoke. Kale led the left flank, 3 kills in 5 minutes. Then a blast to the shoulder knocked him to the ground. He rose, still fighting. Drew moved like he'd never stopped. He was fire in human form, calculated, merciless. One shot between helmets. A grenade rolled under a tank, followed by a controlled smile. He tore through enemy lines with surgical rage. They said later it was like watching a storm with a name. Isari's men had been trained to kill Ashborn, not him. In the command tent, Reyna listened to the screams pouring through comms. Her fingers trembled over the detonator she never wanted to use. Behind her, a boy, barely 12, stood with a medical kit. "Why are we fighting?" he asked. She couldn't answer. Outside, the world fell apart. Kale regrouped near the southern barricade. Smoke made it hard to breathe. He was missing half a boot and most of a plan. "Where's Halverson?" he yelled over the gunfire. No one knew, because Drew had gone forward alone. Isari stepped off her shuttle like a queen walking into hell, flanked by elite guards. She marched through fire toward the Corps' final wall, the one they said couldn't be breached. She saw the bodies, Ashborn, civilians, her own men, all dead. She didn't blink. "This ends today," she said to no one. Then she saw him across the valley, through the smoke and chaos. Drew Halverson. He stood tall, rifle low, armor scarred, a figure from nightmares and legends. Their eyes met.
The air grew colder. Isari raised her hand. Her men spread out. Drew didn't move. He didn't have to. The two armies clashed in a final, desperate push. Hand to hand, no tech, just rage, steel, blood, dirt in every breath. Kale reached the command wall just in time to see Drew and Isari collide. A flash of knives, gunfire, sparks on metal. She was faster, he was meaner. She drew blood first, a slash across his ribs. He responded with a broken nose and 2 ribs crushed under his fist. They weren't fighting for victory. They were fighting because nothing else was left. Reyna watched from a drone feed, her finger hovering over the emergency payload. If they lost the wall, she'd vaporize the entire sector. She didn't want to, but she would. Isari stabbed Drew in the thigh. He tackled her into a wall. She grabbed his neck. He bit her hand. They fell together into the mud, choking on dirt, spitting venom and pain. "You turn—"
Silence. Only the wind. Isari's eyes widened, then closed. Drew stumbled back, panting, bleeding from 7 places. He dropped the blade. Kale reached him seconds later. "It's over," he said. Drew looked at him. "No." He looked past the smoke, the bodies, the crater that had been their last defense. "It's just quiet, now." Then he collapsed. They found him breathing, barely. Reyna kept the payload locked. The boy beside her didn't ask any more questions. In the aftermath, the Varun fleet withdrew, leaderless, beaten, not destroyed, but done. The Corps held somehow. Kale took over as full commander, reluctantly. Reyna stayed, so did many others. But Drew didn't wake up for 3 weeks. When he didn't speak, not for a long time. They tried to give him medals. He refused. Tried to name a defense grid after him. He laughed once and never again. Tried to hold a parade. He left before sunrise. A year passed. The galaxy began to rebuild. The Ashborn faded. Some stayed protectors, others just vanished. No one ever saw Drew Halverson again. But on distant worlds, in cities clawing their way back from ashes, you could still find his words etched into broken walls. You want war? Then watch your worlds burn. And next to it, smaller, fresher, newer. You want peace? Then bleed for it. Kale stood at the edge of the landing pad on Arcos 9, looking out over the new settlement. The core had grown, structures rising from the rubble like stubborn weeds, children with tentative smiles, people carving out a future they only dared to dream of. But Kale's eyes were on the horizon, where the sky met the metal horizon and the weight of the past lingered like smog. After the carnage and loss, a fragile calm had descended. The Varun had pulled back. The Ashborn had splintered. Civilian systems cautiously, tentatively, reached out. It was peaceful, but Kale could feel the tremor in that peace, a heartbeat deeper than the calm. Drew Halverson remained absent. Rumors whispered about him living as a hermit on a distant rock, a mercenary for hire, a ghost ship captain, or worse, dead. Kale didn't know which to believe. Every theory sounded believable, but none offered hope. On a rare, quiet morning, Kale walked through the settlement's marketplace, stalls selling recycled tech, roasted rations, crude textiles. Traders bartered with locals. Children chased stray animals. For the first time, the Corps felt more home than hideout. He paused at a tent where an old Varun engineer worked side by side with human mechanics. They didn't exchange a single word. Trust was still a fragile thing. But Kale saw the tension ease. Inside the dome, tables had been pushed together to form a makeshift plenary chamber. Hollow screens showed stock levels, delivery schedules, regional stability maps. Survivors, scientists, former Ashbourne leaders, even a few Varun defectors. All eyes turned to Kale as he entered. "Morning," he said, voice hoarse. He motioned them to sit. "We're not here to talk about war. We're here to talk about peace. That doesn't mean comfort. It means accountability." A scientist raised her hand. "What about the Ashbourne cells still raiding Varun territory? Kidnappings? Reprisals?" Kale nodded. "We've been tracking them. Some are ex-military, taking what they see as vengeance. We can't pretend all humans are innocent. We need to rein them in, or neutralize them." A representative from the OS belt, a stocky man with mechanical facial plates, spoke up. "Our people harbor deep resentment. We can't just forgive. The wounds are fresh. But we can channel that energy into rebuilding, not raiding." Kale took a breath. "That's what we're trying to do. But forgiveness is earned, not demanded." They talked into the afternoon. Infrastructure, resource fairness, military boundaries, arrests for raiders, compensation programs. None of it easy, but Kale saw for the first time that war's children were attempting governance. A beginning. Night came, and Kale returned to his sparse quarters. He looked at a photo pinned to the wall, a grainy capture of Ashbourne fighters, including him and Reyna, standing victorious on the rubble-strewn plains of Aora Prime. He traced a finger over his younger face, a man unbroken by guilt. But that man was gone. Reyna knocked and stepped inside, quiet. In her hand, a data chip. Something came in from deep space. Scouts. An unregistered ship near Sector 19. No IFF. She looked at Kale and said, "Could be Ashbourne. Could be Varun loyalists. Could be Drew." Kale said softly, his stomach twisting. Reyna exhaled. "He's alive." The next morning, Kale summoned the settlement's governing council. People listened, wide-eyed, as he addressed them. "As of last night, we have confirmed intel. Halverson's alive. Ship's hull matches older Ashbourne designs. Hull markings are military grade, but beaten. If he wants us, he'll come." A woman from the Terran delegation frowned. "What if he doesn't come to us? What if he's on a vendetta?" Kale bit his lip. "Then we face it. We stand together. We're no longer hiding from our ghosts. If he's out there, he's still powerful. But he's not invincible." Heavy silence. Then someone nodded. Determination flickered. They'd regained enough hope to want justice, even if that meant confront. Drew's silhouette flickered into life. He wore an old coat, stained and patched. His eyes, though dim, still held fire. "Kale." Drew's voice was gravel and steel. "I need sanctuary." Kale's heart thudded. "On Arcos 9? Drew nodded, face half hidden. "They rebuilt. I lost my way after I did things I thought I could live with, but the ghosts followed. They never stopped. I need silence. I need to make sure what comes next doesn't undo what you're trying to build." Kale's throat was tight. "I'll have safe passage ready. But I need your word. No reprisals, no more war." Drew paused. "I don't know who I'd be without war. But I'll try." The connection went dead. Kale stared at the blank hollow, unsure if ghosts could truly be silenced, but willing to try. 3 days later, a battered scout ship arrived under cloak. It landed outside the dome at dawn. People watched with cautious eyes. Reyna stood guard beside Kale as the hatch hissed. Drew stepped out, less majestic than rumors painted him, frail, haunted, but raw humanity in his posture. Kale stepped forward. They stared a moment. No handshake, no hug. They'd never been friends, but they'd fought together, shared loss, known each other's shadows. Kale nodded. Go inside. We'll take care of you. Inside the council chamber, Kale introduced Drew. Some turned away, others stared with anger or fear. No applause, no hatred, just silence. Kale spoke up. This man saved us from Varanette. He almost died for that. But he's also a war criminal, a man who ordered civilian strikes. We're not honoring him, but we are giving him a chance to live, to redeem, to build, not destroy. Drew bowed his head. I've taken years of lives. I've stolen galaxies. I don't deserve forgiveness. I just want to live. A Varan defector rose. Her voice trembled. Do you think you can live with peace, Halverson? She used his full name, formal, scorn, honesty. Can you look at us, humans in Varan, and not ache? Drew swallowed. I don't know yet, but I want to try. More silence. After a heartbeat, the stocky OS Beltman spoke up. We give you a window, but know this, we're watching. Drew nodded. I expected nothing less. Weeks passed. Drew moved into a small habitat outside the core. No guards, no fanfare, but whispers followed him. He was seen helping at repairs, nursing a Varan infant back to health. Reyna shook her head. Number signals, human. Same comm signatures used by Ashbourne's splinter cells. Kale slammed his fist on the table. So, war never left us. Reyna turned. Guess whose comms flagged nearby? Kale closed his eyes. Drew? They looked at each other, hope and dread mixed. He found Drew in the training yard, running laps, stamina drills, sand-drenched clothes, face like a storm. Drew glanced at Kale, sweat dripping. Things going wrong? Kale showed him the data. Drew swallowed, stopped the drill. It's real, he said. Ashbourne cells. They're recruiting, weapons moving out, using your name as rally cry. Kale stared. We're rebuilding. You were supposed to end that. Drew closed his eyes, then fell to his knees on the sand. Quiet tears spilled. I wanted this, he whispered. Wanted to atone. But I never left the war behind. I'm built for destruction. Kale knelt. Then build something else with us. Show them there's life after war. Drew shook his head. How? I don't even know how to live without ashes. Kale rested a hand on his shoulder. Then start by stopping them. Night fell. They walked through the settlement under dim lights. Reyna and 2 others followed, a Varun defector scientist and an Ashbourne scout sent by Kale. They boarded Drew's old scout ship, crew of 5, cold weapons tucked under coats, comms encrypted. They took off under scramble lights, no announcements, no warning, just silent purpose. The ship crept through empty corridors. Drew led, silent, weapon raised. They reached a hangar. Stark, ships missing, supplies gone, welds cut loose, signs of hurried escape. Reyna shook her head. They gone. Drew clenched his jaw. Number. I know where they're heading. The Varun defector checked signals. Sector 22 Rhea sector, old pirate caves. Kale tapped a map terminal. We'll need clearance to dock, and no one knows you're alive. Drew stared at the console. Then we can't ask. They jumped to Rhea sector and entered the coordinates, a dark planet with half its surface burned away by previous orbital bombardment, cavern mouths dotting the crater fields. They docked inside one with hidden approach protocols. They walked through tunnels, suit sensors droning low, each step a fragile mixture of hope and regret. Then came a muffled voice. Halverson! They froze. A man in black fatigues stepped out.
some greaves and plates recognizable from Varun gear stolen earlier. He had cold eyes. "Didn't think you'd come," he said. Drew stared. "You, Bishop?" The man smiled, thin. "Went by Raymond before I joined the Ashbourne after Aora. I need a purpose."
Reyna stepped closer. "And you'll use his name?" He tilted his head. "He's alive on Arcos. That's fuel, inspiration." Kale's hand dropped to his sidearm. "We'll dismantle this today. Stand down." Bishop shook his head. "Never." "You leave now," Drew said. Bishop hardened. "Never. It's war again." They clashed in the cavern tunnels. Kale fired, blew Bishop's guard off. Reyna neutralized bombs Bishop set. Drew faced Bishop in close quarters, bone slammed, blow after blow. Bishop was strong, but Drew was relentless. He finally forced Bishop back, weapon drawn to the throat. "Call it off," Drew growled. Bishop smirked. "They're already fighting on Arcos. You're too late." With those words, he kicked off a grenade rack. Tunnels exploded, bonds shook, dust rained, they ran. They escaped as tunnels collapsed. Communications were cut. Their hull integrity weakened. Radiation alarms blinked. They reached ship. Engines roared to life just as, behind them, the cavern entrance collapsed inward. They jumped. Escape. Back on Arcos, alarms sounded. Fighting erupted. Ashbourne cells launched rocket pods at core outer walls. Civilians ran. Plasma pulse arcs jumped across barricades. Kale activated defense turrets. Drew emerged onto walkways, bulletproof, blood-stained. He didn't wait for orders. He moved across trenches, slamming Varanaday ammo plants to explode. He stormed shields with bloody fists. He became war incarnate. He held his name as a weapon again. Hours later, silence returned. Bodies smoldered. The settlement trembled under broken shields and craters. Kale counted losses. Dead Ashbourne, dead civilians, broken trust. But the cells were gone. Victory? No. Victory without cost. He found Drew in the mess hall, exhausted, limping, eyes hollow. "It stopped," Kale said. Drew looked at him. "It didn't stop. We just bought time." He pressed his hand to a scorch-marked floor. This was the dream. Kale stared at him. "Dreams get broken." Drew broke eye contact. "Then we rebuild again." No credit, no ceremony, no cheering. They worked into the night, rebuilding shields, burying the dead, reinstalling faith. Drew refused attention. He worked alongside station migrants, patching walls, carrying supplies. He spoke to kids who saw a monster doing kindness. He taught them repair, asked nothing in return. One night a child approached him, small, bruised leg, but curious eyes. "Are you the man who burned Varun Prime?" she asked. Drew stopped, breathed deep. "Yes." She waited. "Did it make the world better?" He knelt. "Sometimes war is the price of silence, but peace is the price of blood." The girl stared. "I'm sorry for the blood," Drew said. "I hope he couldn't finish." She nodded and walked away. Months passed. Trade routes flourished. Varun defectors oversaw tech rebuilding. Cultural exchange began, not harmony, but contact. Suspicious, fragile, maybe enough. Ashbourne shards had dwindled. Most either vanished or joined the rebuilding. A few still whispered in the dark. Kale tracked them, arrested when needed. No trials yet, just containment. Peace was imperfect. Drew stayed on Arcos 9 for a year. Then, on a cold morning, he was gone. They said he took nothing but a black coat and a rifle. Kale didn't mourn. He understood too well. Long after, when the settlement had a name, Hope World, New Iris, the plaque in the main square read, "In memory of those we lost, the survivors who build, and the man who showed us that peace is not the absence of war, but the presence of courage." It didn't mention Drew Halverson by name, but scratched beneath, in faint letters, "You want war? Then watch your worlds burn." And below that, grainy but clear, "Peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from scars. Years passed. Time softened some edges, but it never erased the scars. The galaxy that Drew Halverson once ignited had shifted, not into peace, but into balance. There were still borders, there were still weapons, but there were also agreements, trade pacts, shared colonies. It wasn't unity, it was tolerance, and sometimes that was enough. On New Aris, the settlement once called Arcos 9 thrived. Buildings made from old Ashbourne metal now housed schools, clinics, forums. Children ran across fields where bunkers used to stand. Engineers from both human and Varan backgrounds co-managed energy grids and shared scientific breakthroughs. But even as the world thrived, it remembered. At the center of the city stood the old command dome, preserved, untouched. Inside, every wall held holographs and images of what came before: burned flags, peace charters, video of the Varan riots, images of Ashbourne craters. And always, always Drew, not worshipped, remembered. Some nights, Cale walked those halls alone. He'd taken no title beyond director, refused medals. He oversaw what he had to: security, stability, communication with outside systems. He left leadership of the settlement to a council of civilians, scientists, and even one Varan child who had grown into a fierce administrator. Cale's hair had gone gray, his joints ached, but his mind was sharp. And every year he made a single recording, a letter to someone who might never hear it.
"Drew?" Cale said into the mic, voice low, steady, worn. "Another year, another orbit? Kids here are smarter than we ever were. Stronger, too. We got a full medical system now. Water reclamation's up 30%. Oh, and that trade agreement with the Sarin Collective went through. Even got them to admit their soldiers committed war crimes during the occupation. Small steps, but we'll take them." He paused. "They still whisper about you, not with fear, with questions. Did you ever mean to stop? Did you ever feel peace? Or were you just tired?" Cale looked at the mic, unsure if it even transmitted anymore. "I don't know if you're alive, but I do know this. You changed us. You forced us to see that survival isn't enough, that vengeance doesn't satisfy, and that sometimes the only way to rebuild is to break everything first." He turned it off. Far across the stars, in a region known only as the Lattice, a network of abandoned asteroid towns and exiled warships, an old man walked into a cantina. The room fell quiet. He didn't carry a gun, just a satchel and a datapad. He sat in the corner, ordered water, listened to the conversations. Raiders talked about lost causes. Traders complained about tariffs. A young man bragged about torching a civilian freighter. The old man raised an eyebrow. When the young raider laughed about slitting the throat of a Varoon priest, the old man stood. "You proud of that?" he asked. The boy turned, sneered. "Who the hell are you, old man?" "Someone who remembers what war really costs." The boy scoffed. "You going to lecture me?" "No," the man said. "I'm going to bury you." He moved before anyone else did. The boy was on the ground in seconds, windpipe crushed, not dead, just silenced. The old man turned to the rest of the room. "You think violence makes you powerful? It doesn't. It just makes you hollow." Someone in the back stood, an older woman. She stared at the man. "You're him," she whispered. "You're Halverson." He didn't deny it. She stepped forward slowly. "Why come back now?" He looked at her. "Because I made a mess, and I need to clean it up." Over the next months, Drew moved through the fringes, alone, quiet. He found the remaining Ashbourne cells that had turned rogue, the ones feeding chaos, trading on his name. He dismantled them, not with fire but with presence. Some he persuaded, others he fought. But everywhere he went, he left behind truth. The war is over. We lost, and we lived. That's enough. On New Aris, Kale received a message, encrypted, no origin trace, just one line. I'm done running. Attached was a set of coordinates, old mining column.
Kale walked up. No words at first. Then, "You came back." Drew nodded. "Didn't think I would." Kale looked around. It's enough." They sat, shared water, looked up at the stars neither had time to appreciate before. Finally, Kale asked, "You think it was worth it?" Drew was quiet a long time. "I used to think only fire could change the galaxy, that war was language, that the loudest one lived longest." He exhaled. "I was wrong. Fire doesn't teach. It just burns." Kale looked down. "But peace doesn't come without a price." "No," Drew agreed. "But maybe that price isn't lives. Maybe it's letting go." They talked all night, not about war, about silence, memory, loss. At dawn, Kale stood. "You coming back?" Drew shook his head. "I can't lead anymore. I've done enough damage." Kale nodded. "Then stay here. Rest. But if we ever need you—" Drew met his eyes. "I'll come." Kale returned to New Eris quietly. No announcements, no explanations. Life continued. Drew was never seen again. But each year, Kale returned to that cabin, sometimes alone, sometimes with a trainee, a child who needed answers. Drew would be there, not waiting, just present. And each time, the galaxy moved on a little more, not healed, but breathing, alive. And in the sky above New Eris, satellites beamed one simple broadcast, a quote engraved on every frequency, every language. "You want war? Then watch your worlds burn." And beneath it, in Drew Halverson's own final words, "You want peace? Then be ready to pay for it every day, with choices, with mercy, with restraint. It's harder than war, but it's worth it."